All right, welcome back in to the review show for week 3 across the league. Just want to go over the 5 different matchups we had from the week. Kind of go over again each week. We're going to go over which players did the best, which players were a bit disappointing and were duds on the week, injury news, things like that, and then preview week 4. So without further ado, let's take a look at my matchup against Derek. Derek came in week 3 0-2 and last in the league, was the only 0-2 team. Myself coming off a pretty big win in week 2 over John's team with 193 total fantasy points. So bit of a letdown this week. You can see only had 119 points. On Monday night, as 2 games were going on, there was a moment there where it looked like I might just squeeze out a very small victory over Derek, but in the end, Zach Ertz wound up getting 8.8 fantasy points. He was on 0 for a while, but eventually wound up breaking out in that game later in the second half, putting him over top of myself in terms of getting the victory, 128 to 119. For me, just really disappointing performances out of my wide receiver corps this week. CeeDee Lamb, single digits, 9.7. Zay Flowers had over 22 points last week, only had 5.3 this week. So really just disappointed in those 2 guys. Everybody else mostly did their job. Jalen Hurts could have done a little bit better, only 13 fantasy points this week. Bench-wise, Amari Cooper finally did something. Had only... I think single-digit fantasy point performances in the first two weeks of the schedule. So to finally break out and do something, awesome. But did it on my bench, so not too happy about that, unfortunately. As well as my kicker too, 0 points after coming off of over 20 fantasy points. So just some areas, hopefully this week we can get better at wide receiver. CDs, Zay Flowers can hopefully get back to double-digit performances. Same with my kicker. 0 is unacceptable on my team. Likely going to get benched or replaced with that kind of performance. So looking forward to week 4, my matchup against Coach Deep Fakes, Barry's team, and looking forward to week 4. Let's go over Joey's matchup, Group's HR partner versus Team D Money, which is Darshan's team. Darshan didn't crack 100 points and wound up taking the L this week. He moves to 1-2, whereas Joey moves to 2-1, third in the lead. Looking at the breakdown of their performances, Devon Achan, single-digit performance, could have done a little bit more for Darshan's team to get him an opportunity to crack 100 and get the dub. Him as well with Brandon Ayuk, you would think with Debo being out and hurt, George Kittle being out and hurt, that he would have cracked double digits, but unfortunately did not. Tight end, still kind of a miserable position across all fantasy teams. 3.1, Dalton Schultz, not great there. And then the Bucs defense, only 2 fantasy points, and Jake Elliott, 0. So a lot of single-digit performances from Ayuk on in his starting 9. So just a really rough week for Darshan when looking over the box score here. Nothing really to talk about really on his bench either. Some injuries, A.J. Brown, Joe Mixon, George Kittle. 3 guys he probably would have likely had started had they been healthy and maybe would have given him the opportunity to beat Joey this week. On Joey's side, Anthony Richardson, only 7 fantasy points. You like to see that reach 15, 16, 17, 18 or more. He was projected to have 18, so a bit of a disappointing performance out of him this week. Other than that, again, looks like he had a similar situation to myself where, Mike Evans, Tyreek Hill each only had single-digit fantasy point performances, 7 and 3.7 respectively. So I could tell that Joey probably wasn't too happy about that. He would have definitely probably been likely in the 130, 140 point range instead of 114 if those 2 guys would have done a little bit better. But at the bottom half of his starting lineup, DK 21, the Jets defense 22, and Harrison Butker 12. So can't ask for much better than that for Joey's team. And then on the bench, some injuries, like Puka's been out now for a couple weeks, going to continue to be out for a little while. And finally, the Carolina wide receivers finally woke up due to Andy Dalton starting now in place of Bryce Young, since Bryce Young sucks and got benched. Deontay Johnson, 27.2 fantasy points. which was basically more than double his total in the first 2 weeks combined. So absolutely popped off there in that win. The Carolina's first win in the season over the Raiders. Even Adam Thielen had 13. So great week from the bench for Joey's team. Still wound up getting the dub regardlessly. Moving on to the third matchup, we have George. George's great team right there versus Alex. Alex's team right here. So narrow victory there, only about 6-point victory for George. Looking at his starting nine, looks like the only letdowns really were the Bengals defense with 0 points. Wound up still getting the victory over Alex, so that wasn't too much of a hindrance for him. Michael Pittman Jr., 7.6 fantasy points, not great. Johnny Mudd filling in for the injured TJ Hawkinson, which is on Georgia's bench. I think he had a touchdown, so 7.2 is not terrible. And everybody else did pretty well there for him in his starting nine. Maybe wanted to see a little bit more out of Jake Moody, the kicker for the Niners, only had 5 fantasy points. Bench-wise, doesn't look like there was anybody who would have been a better plug-and-play for him. Maybe the only one I can think of is Christian Kirk being in place of Michael Pittman Jr., but 9 days out or 6 days out of the week, you're not going to be starting Christian Kirk over Michael Pittman Jr. So wound up again not hurting him. He still got the victory. Alex's team, really disappointing performance from Ramondre Stevenson, for the Patriots running back there. Only 1.3 fantasy points. I think the first 2 games he wound up having double-digit fantasy point performances, so definitely a regression for him there. Wound up getting Juwan Jennings, the 49ers wide receiver, too. Picked him off the waiver wire, and there you go. 47.5 fantasy points. Best performance so far I've seen from the wide receiver position from any week this year. I think he had like 3 touchdowns. So absolutely popped off. Even with that performance, unfortunately, Alex still took the L this week. Again, just from performances like Ramondre Stevenson. Had he had even like 7 or 8 or 9 fantasy points, that would have given Alex the W, unfortunately. And another disappointing thing to look at there was -1 points from the Raiders defense. So either way, defensive-wise, even on his bench, the Cowboys had -2. So it just wasn't a great week for his defenses, unfortunately. And his kicker, Justin Tucker, having 3 fantasy points. So things to hopefully look forward to for Alex's team. Figure out the defensive situation, try to get some positive points there. T. Higgins now being back and healthy enough to play. Only 6.9, but that was coming off of missing the first couple weeks. So once he's back into rhythm, I think he should bounce back and have a good performance and could be somebody that Alex will look forward to starting. And better luck here in the future matchups for you, Alex. Moving on to John. This is a matchup of Titans right here, first and second in the league. Both teams now 2-1. Neck and neck again. Only 7-8 point victory there for John over Brad, which is the team right here. John's team absolutely stacked. Said it right after the draft. Loaded team for him. Josh Allen, 30.92 fantasy points. Can't ask for more than that. Saquon, 34.6. So those 2 guys are big time performers for John's fantasy team this year and will continue to be big performers for him. Swift, 6.2, not looking too good with a 15.2 projection. Hopefully, you can probably plug in somebody like Devin Singletary to start in place of Swift. I would think that's the smartest move moving forward, since Devin Singletary has actually proven to be a pretty decent asset. I know I kind of shot on that pick initially, but has wound up having some volume with the Giants at the running back position and scoring touchdowns, which is important. So might be somebody that John considers, starting over DeAndre Swift, with DeAndre Swift just not really performing all that well so far this season. Olave with 20, Nico Collins with 13, Travis Kelce only 7, and the Browns defense 8 points. But altogether, if you look at that starting 9, put it up against anybody else in the leagues, and it's likely winning 9 out of 10 times. Like, his starting 9 is one of the best in the league by far, and he has a very good, strong chance to get the number 1 overall seed this year when it comes time to the playoffs. Looking at Brad's team, regardless of the 134 points and the loss, like, really resilient team here, considering all the injuries. So, like, on his bench, Christian McCaffrey been out now for a minute. is going to continue to be out, but he at least has Jordan Mason. Cooper Kupp going to be out for a little while. Keenan Allen should be back soon, but is hurt right now. So dealing with some pretty significant injuries to notable positions, wide receiver, running back, Raheem Mostert as well. So with all that being said, still putting up 134. I know it was in a loss, but regardlessly, that starting nine, Lamar Jackson, Kyron Williams, 25 and 31 respectively. Terry McLaurin finally did something, 21 fantasy points. Monday Night Football caught a touchdown. And Aaron Jones has been a stud for Brad's team, getting over 20 points each week, basically. So the only thing notable for him, it looks like Trey McBride, only 5 fantasy points. Devontae, 8 points. Ravens defense, 4, and his kicker only got 1. So if he would have gotten double-digit performances from even half those guys I just mentioned, he definitely would have taken the win this week. Last but not least, Coach Deepfakes, who I got this week, currently in 10th in the league. Got blown out this week by Pat's team, who's currently in 4th, 2-1 overall. Pat had a great week. We'll go over that in a moment. But to just kind of highlight Barry's team, Zamir White, 3.4 fantasy points. Just not good enough to get the job done and help Barry get over 100 points this week. I'm sure looking at his bench, he would have much rather put in Alexander Madison. Both are the Raiders running backs there, so sometimes it's just a volume game, touchdown game, things like that can decide who's going to boom or bust each week. So just unfortunate there. Same with James Conner. He just got from me in a trade. Unfortunately, only had 3.5 fantasy points. The guy is usually good for 15 to 20 or more. So bit of a disappointment for Barry in terms of his running back position. Wide receiver-wise, pretty good. Might have wanted a little bit more from Xavier Worthy this week for sure, but can't ask for more than 20 from Amon-Ra and 17 from Marvin Harrison Jr. this week, which is excellent. Another big position for him that he's going to want to address is the tight end situation. Mark Andrews putting up a complete donut, 0 fantasy points. Not great, especially when you have on your bench Dallas Goedert putting up 28. So that's probably a no-brainer decision for Coach D, for Barry to plug and play now this week in Week 4 against me, Dallas Goedert, in his starting 9 and in that tight end position there. Kicker-wise, defense-wise, 8 and 11, can't really argue with that. That's pretty decent. So I know Barry will bounce back this week. I'm facing him this week, so definitely going to be a good matchup there. I think in terms of him, what he needs to see is Joe Burrow continue to put up numbers like that, 26 fantasy points. He needs a bounce back performance from his running back corps if he wants to have a chance, and then just everybody else continue to do what they want to do with the wide receivers, that is, and continue to put up good numbers. And at tight end, just making sure that Dallas Goedert is definitely in his starting 9. Looking at Pat's team, the highest performing team this week from a point total perspective, 152.66 points. A lot of that had to come from Dak, over 30 fantasy points, one of the best. Him and Josh Allen had great weeks this week at the quarterback position. Josh Jacobs, bit of a letdown for him, only 5 fantasy points, but again, didn't really hinder him from winning this week at all. Pretty good numbers from the wide receiver position. Garrett Wilson, 14, Drake London, 19, basically, and Rashee Rice, 30. That's excellent for the wide receiver position. One of the better wide receiver corpse you can see. Even has Jaden Reed and Jalen Waddle on his bench, so Pat's got to be pretty happy about that. And then Sam Laporta, 5.6 points. You'd like to see that hit double digits for Sam, catch a touchdown. Bit of a disappointing year so far for Sam on Pat's team. One of the highest tight ends taken off the board this year in the draft, so but likely on his bench only at 1.4. So he'll have to address that if he wants to continue to win, moving forward here and address that tight end position. Packers defense came in clutch for him, 25 fantasy points. Big reason why he was the highest performing team this week. One of the best performances from a defense this week with 25 points. And his kicker only had 4 points. So, if Josh Jacobs gets double digits, Sam Laporta and his kicker, Pack easily could have sniffed the 170s, 180s for sure this week. So, great performance by Pat. He's currently now 4th in the league overall. Now looking at the total standings, so you can see in first place at the moment is Brad's team, the team. He is 2-1 overall. John is also 2-1. You're going to see half the league is basically 2-1, positions 1 through 5 there. So Brad, John, Joey, Pat, and George, and then myself right there at 6, 1 and 2, and then you have Darshan, Derek, Alex, and Coach Deep Fakes, which is Barry. There's a more breakdown of the tiebreakers for points for, points against. I still hold the current lead for the points for. And in terms of who has the least amount of points for, that is looking like Coach Deep Fakes, Barry's team at the moment. But a long season ahead. It's only been three games, 3 weeks so far. Excuse me, not 3 games, 3 weeks so far. 3 matchups, that is. And then looking forward to week 4 here. Let's take a look at the schedule. So week 4, we got Derek 1 and 2 versus Darshan 1 and 2. So the winner of that one will get their second win on the season. And you got Joey 2 and 1 versus George 2 and 1. Great matchup right there between 2 and 1 teams. Winner of that gets get their third win on the year and move to 3 and 1. So that's a big advantage there. Myself 1 and 2 versus Barry 1 and 2. Both of us are looking to get our second win on the season and get to 500. So good matchup there. Alex and John, the two brothers, the twins, going head to head. 1 and 2 Alex versus 2 and 1 John. So that'll be an interesting matchup to see how that pans out this week. And then another good matchup of 2 really good teams in this league. Brad's team 2 and 1, first place in the league, versus Pat's team 2 and 1 as well, 4th place in the league at the moment. So really good matchups this week. We'll definitely see what happens. Early predictions, I would say Darshan likely going to win this week. Then would go George's team. Myself, how am I not going to pick against myself? Sorry, Coach Steve, Barry. John's team over Alex, and then Brad's team over Pat. So those are my early predictions this week. We'll see how that plays out, and looking forward to the rest of the season, the rest of this week ahead, and best of luck to everyone. Cheers.